Remember me?
Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of Predator, Killer of Killers. I'm David Chen here with Patrick Klepek. We are going to discuss our overall thoughts on this animated film that's streaming right now on Hulu. And then we will break down some of our favorite components of the movie. I do also want to say again, be sure to subscribe to Decoding TV in podcast form or on YouTube, because I'll have an interview with the director, Dan Trachtenberg, coming out in the next few days as a bonus release. So, Patrick Klepek, I guess before we talk about Predator Killer of Killers, briefly, I'm just curious, what did you think of Dan Trachtenberg's last effort in the Predator universe, Prey, which is also streaming on Hulu right now?
Yeah, I think Prey was a remarkable film. Maybe most impressive was that it managed to make a character, a villain that I have seen depicted many times over the decades. Someone in which its entire power set and like what it does, deeply familiar, scary and intimidating again. That's like the greatest challenge when you revisit these iconic horror or like characters that exist like in a capacity to scare and intimidate. They tend these adaptations or storytelling involving them tends to get skew towards action or spectacle because you've run out of ways to scare the audience. And I thought what Prey did a really good job of was grounding that villain again and like grounding that with a really novel setting and character and their naivete and the kind of arc they go on. So yeah, I was really shocked that I liked Prey as much as I did and that it was able to breathe so much life into a character that at some point just felt like it was an iconic design with an iconic film, and
that's it.
And that's about it.
Yeah. I also loved Prey. I should point out, I do consider Dan Trachtenberg a friend, so you should consider everything I say suspect, even more than usual, I would say. But yeah, I think Prey is just astonishing. Such a novel take on the character. The idea of the Predator going back in time, like having come to Earth, not in the modern day, hundreds of years ago, is just like, I'll be honest. If it was me kind of thinking through that idea, I'd be like, well, that makes absolutely no sense because the Predator's technology is so advanced. There's no way that humans back then would ever be able to take on the Predator. And of course, now we get Predator Killer of Killers, where we see the Predator go back in time to 3 distinct time periods in our past. 841 AD in Scandinavia with a Viking warrioress named Ursa. 1609 in Japan with 2 brothers named Kenji and Kiyoshi, and then the 1940s with John Torres in the Atlantic Ocean fighting on behalf of the U.S. Navy. So it's a triptych of stories where the Predator goes and tries to find an alpha, the most badass warrior alive on Earth at that time. And so overall thoughts, Patrick Klepek, on Predator Killer of Killers?
Part of what I really enjoyed about Killer of Killers is that it really leans into the fact that the Predator, as a concept, is a big old coward. He's a big old fancy pants with his high-end technology, comes in and surprises people and takes them out. Ooh, like you're so powerful. Like, I can't believe you pulled it off with your invisibility and your high-tech weaponry. It's the equivalent of like a big game hunter, right?
Right. Like people that go to a safari or some hunting where essentially like they let the game loose in front of you and you just need to point at it and shoot at it. There's no skill involved. It's
right, which there's an inherent sort of patheticness to the Predator, like which is part of the fun of the character and how like oppressive and intimidating you feel. Because once you think about what they're doing, you're like, you sad little man child. Like what do we do? What have you accomplished here? All that said, I did really like Killer of Killers. Probably sort of the criticism and a complaint, which is to say, this is kind of a like short anthology, and yet I think many of the stories end up getting sort of short shrift. They feel like we've just cut to the third act. They try to condense an entire sort of storytelling, like 3-act story arc into a single act, and I feel that is very rushed in ways that the fact that they're able to make me care about the characters at all is actually pretty impressive economic storytelling. And yet I think many times I felt this more like in the second and third stories than I did in the first story, that these just don't have enough room to breathe to get me to get all that invested in the characters. But what sort of makes up for that is the spectacle, and the action is just top notch. Like, they're just incredibly cool fights and sequences that play out across all four parts of Killer of Killers. And to its it made me forget about the fact that not a lot of storytelling happened until we got to this moment, because the really inventive nature of how the predator attacks and how the humans fight back, which was one of the best elements of Prey, really what made that movie sing. You see that throughout every one of these instances, these little stories. And so broadly, I really liked it. I just wish there was more of it, because I think it would have felt more complete and full if this was like a 3-episode event or a 4-episode event. I think it would have been better. As it stands, it's like really fun and flashy, but I think it could have been something quite a bit more if it had been given more time to stand alone.
I love this movie. I do think you're giving short shrift a little bit to what was accomplished in each of these segments, right? In each of these segments, we need to get introduced to a brand new character or set of characters. B, have some kind of emotional stakes for what they're trying to accomplish. C, have them meet the predator and like comprehend what the predator even is. And then D, fight the predator and kind of resolve that situation. And they were
It does.
able to.
I said it's economic, but if I cut
Yeah.
my hand off willingly, and like, well, Patrick, you've made your job harder. Why'd you cut your hand off? I'm just saying it's a deep compliment that I care at all, and I think it goes a great distance to making it work. But if each of those had 20 more minutes, I think it would have been served better. Is all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. You liked what you saw of the characters and wanted to get to know them more,
Yes.
right? That's kind of where you end up with the movie. I am impressed. I guess like what for you is a bug, for me is a feature. Like, getting to know these characters in such a short period of time, caring about them a little bit. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about it momentarily, but the fact that they all tie into a broader narrative that we then see at the end, I thought is just like a really clever way to structure the movie. And just there's not that much dialogue in the movie, but there's a lot of storytelling that's going on in the movie that I really appreciated. But really, the main event here is the action, which, as you've indicated, is spectacular. I mean, a lot of the action feels like it's shot and edited as though it's done using conventional cameras.
Yeah.
This is one of the first movies ever to be animated using the Unreal Engine, I believe, which is kind of cool. But oftentimes, what can happen with action movies that are animated is that the camera will have this kind of floating, free form quality that feels very untethered from any kind of reality. Whereas in Predator Killer of Killers, it feels like they used quote unquote conventional lenses, conventional depth of field, and so on to tell the story. Like a lot of the shots, not all of them, but a lot of the shots you can imagine, like, oh, a real camera was placed here and was shot. Obviously, there were no cameras because it's all animated, but they're very much using cinematic language, cinematic action filmmaking language to tell this story, and I think that makes it much more effective.
It doesn't feel like a compromise, right? Like oftentimes,
Right.
like the animated sequel to something, like the film feature you liked is like, all right, I guess I'm ready for the downgrade. And this does not feel like that at all. Like it's a different medium, it's a different approach in its aesthetic, but it feels like, I'm getting a feature film like at home, streaming. Like I don't feel like it doesn't feel like a downgrade, so to speak, whatsoever.
I think one of the things that most impressed me about Prey, Trachtenberg's last movie, was he created a world in which somebody from hundreds of years ago with no modern technology could credibly take down the predator. And what he has done with Killer of Killers is the same thing, where yes, the oldest one, the first chapter called The Shield, takes place over a millennia ago. And the idea that predators have what is cool, by the way, is like the predator technology is also not as advanced, as it is in modern day, but it's still way more advanced than anything they have back then, right? And how can anyone back then stand a chance? And first of all, most of them don't. Like, he kills a lot of those people in the first chapter fairly effortlessly. But you see through the main character Ursa's ingenuity and her mettle and hardiness that they are able to stand a chance and potentially defeat this thing. And I just think that's just an incredible accomplishment to be able to just tell that story and make it seem credible and believable that people from like 800 AD or 1600 in Japan could take down the Predator in any way that's plausible. I just found that to be an exhilarating prospect. So,
I agree. I think they stick to that rule pretty well in the first two, and then the third one feels a little bit more like, it'd be cool as shit. And I agree, it is cool as shit. But that one's strange. Obviously we're straining reality in all of these forms, but there's a little more grounding, I feel, to the first two, and in the third one, there's a little bit more like, this would just be really fun. Like, how do you take down do a predator dogfight? It actually, in many ways, there are different parts of that that felt like the one of those thrilling sequences in Independence Day, like when Will Smith is like chasing through the canyon, like trying to get away from one of the alien ships there. I was reminded deeply of that, like as like he goes through the town
right.
and like flips the plane vertically, and I was like, all right, but it is cool though. And I feel like, look, rule of cool, right? Like that is fine. But part of, I think, the reason the third act gets away with that is because there's almost an escalation happening in terms of plot armor and sort of like a little bit of strained credulity in favor of like, wouldn't this be neat? That really does culminate with the third act, and especially the fourth act, where, is this what would happen? Maybe not, but it's really cool.
Why don't we talk about each of the chapters individually, Patrick, and then talk about the conclusion? So the first chapter, called "The Shield," we're going to spoil everything now, right? We meet Viking warrioress Ursa, who's leading her son Anders on an expedition to destroy the Kriviks and their leader Zoran. Reading here from Wikipedia, and some really cool moments in this act. There's obviously this one continuous shot where she's kind of hacking her way to Zoran's door, which I thought was very cool. And then all the stuff that happens with the Predator underwater, I really liked, and how he's eventually defeated. But what I think is just my favorite part of this act is, again, these are the oldest characters, like in terms of technology. Like, we are really far back in time, and the Predator has like a sonic boom weapon, and it's just like, how do you defeat a character that has a weapon with technology that's so far beyond anything you've ever can comprehend? And yeah, like I said, you don't. A lot of them just get completely annihilated. But eventually, you kind of find ways to level the playing field, and you don't give up. And Ursa certainly doesn't give up. Anything you liked in particular about this chapter, Patrick?
I thought this one had the most effective, like motivation. Like, I was invested in this character enacting their revenge, and I was like, every moment that it kept going on, because I wasn't really familiar. At this point, I'm not familiar with like the beats that are going to be kind of familiar across these three different stories. So I'm waiting, like, well, when does the Predator come in? And I have to admit, I was, to the story's great credit, kind of rooting for the Predator. Like, hey, back off, man. Like let this play out. And I think there's real restraint shown in like allowing this character to have a real arc before the fight with the, like, I think that first act is the best possible, like efficient, interesting storytelling that managed to give stakes to like the showstopper, which is the fight against the Predator. And I think it succeeds like by every measure. Like, it's part of like the effectiveness of this first one that had me feeling like slightly harsher as we went along, because I think it establishes such a unbelievable high early on in sort of the form, that I'm not sure that acts 2, 3 necessarily get to. But that's more of a compliment to the first one than it is necessarily a detriment to acts 2 and 3.
in Act 2 called The Sword, it happens in Japan in 1609, and Kenji and Kiyoshi are brothers that essentially are forced to fight each other. Kenji is like they're brothers that grow up together, but then one is exiled, and then Kenji comes back as a shinobi, which is cool. It's like samurai versus ninja fight, and then the Predator gets in the mix. This one was probably my favorite one out of the three, personally, just because of
This adds
how.
up. If I could have predicted which one David Chen
Yeah,
liked the most, like
I mean, it's pretty badass. It's there's very little dialogue in this one. I didn't like that. There's much more dialogue in the first chapter and the
Mhm.
third chapters. But I just think there's so many badass moments of these. This like what's so cool is the three acts have three different fighting styles, right? And three different ways of engaging the enemy. And somehow, in an animated film, they were able to bring that all to life. There's just so many badass moments, like the fight at the bell tower when he's trying to prevent any noise from being made. Um, I felt a little bit bad. There's a scene where the Predator comes in, and then I think it's Kenji throws like some smoke grenades on the ground. He runs away, and then like all these guards come in and they see the Predator. I'm like, oh man, like they're all dead. Like they were just guarding the castle. They didn't know they'd have to fight a Predator.
Mhm.
Felt bad about that. And then obviously the big confrontation at the end I thought was super cool, and how these brothers come together and they also take down this Predator together. Just a lot of amazing moments in this one. Patrick, overall thoughts on The Sword, the second chapter?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well. Like the use of the red smoke, like is just like utterly gorgeous. Like when
Yeah,
that happens the first time, I was really taken by that. And the fun part is, and again, once you've watched one, you get to the second one, it's like, okay, they're going to spend some of this time in the early part establishing sort of like features and characteristics of our main character that are then
right.
going to come into play with the confrontation with the Predator, which is fun. Like there is a fun to formula where you like, ooh, like, okay, like I wonder how they're going to use that. And like the red smoke was that one for me. It was like, okay, like that looked so badass that at some point we're going to be using that in the confrontation with the Predator. And so the time when it actually does happen, as they like toss themselves off of a balcony and like whip back, I just thought it was really good. I mean, it's so much here and in all throughout Killer of Killers is one of the things that really stands out or stood out in Prey is thinking through the Predator's weapons and finding novel uses for them, novel visual depictions of them, which is not just taking the iconography for granted, which is
Yeah,
often what happens in sequels. Is like, well, we show you the cool thing and you point at it, and then everybody
right.
claps.
Or using
And
it as a crutch, right? Instead, I think these filmmakers really want to delight you and to make you reconsider your relationship with the iconography. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know the iconography could do that, right? In
right, and it often feels like it's building on the world. It's building on when you see something familiar, it's in service of building something new, which doesn't always happen in works like this. I would say rarely happens in works like this. And part of it worked about Prey. What I like about here is it's not as though uh, it's not acknowledging the past. It's ignoring what's come before. But it Prey and Killer of Killers, and I'm hoping for in Badlands, the sequel film later this year, they don't fall into some of the same traps that like the most Romulus, like the most recent Alien film, which I 90% liked, 90% loved, and then like the ways in which it just trips over itself to acknowledge the past in like the clumsiest way
right,
possible.
yeah,
I feel like again, I love that movie and just wish there was an edit of it that like took some of that stuff out because
mm-hmm,
Romulus has lots of really novel building block stuff that's like we're going to take what you know and do something novel and new and interesting with it, and just has less restraint than what you see here. And I say that less to slag on Romulus and more to just praise the restraint that I often see in this like these newer iterations of the Predator as a character, because I do get to clap like a seal because I see the stuff I know, but then I also know I'm going to see something I've never seen before, and that's what I'm there for, because the entire reason I can clap like a seal is because that was new to me once.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. let's talk a little bit about the third chapter, The Bullet, which takes place in the Atlantic Ocean in the 1940s. John Torres is a Navy fighter pilot engaging the Yautja starship that is just taking down planes left and right. Gotta say, this was probably my least favorite out of the chapters, just because I love the hand-to-hand combat so much in the first two chapters that having it kind of be disconnected in a plane felt a little bit less exciting to me. But there are still some really cool moments. Love particularly how this ends and the big triumphant moment that Torres has taking down the ship. Patrick, what did you think of this chapter?
I I wish we had more setup. Like this is the one that feels like it jumps to the predator extraordinarily quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed the little sequence early on, like with Torres and his father, and then immediately it's like, okay, we have that one beat, and that's all you know about this character, and then we're gonna cut to like the most. I think this one I didn't like time it out, but it felt like it had the longest encounter with the predator, like the quickest introduction,
Mm.
reveal, and then encounter. And whether that's actually true, it felt that way. I think you felt that length in it. So I think the sequence kind of goes on a little bit too long. And I have to say, like, without having known at this point in the story where like what it was all really setting up, Torres feels like he has the most amount of plot armor on of anyone. Like he has the least like credible reason for
He's getting
surviving.
out there on the plane wing and repairing it and doing all kinds of wild, but it's not like the movie has set him up as like he's the
No,
ultimate badass person, right?
no,
Yeah,
no. And I think it's my main criticism as we get to the one that ties everything
yeah.
together is like he continues to be the least like credibly useful and like most plot armory character of the bunch. And like I don't mind the character. It's more about what they're asked to do and how they survive that I find. I understand what it's going for, which is like not every warrior is like this traditional sort of soldier type. Like
Right,
I
right.
get it. I respect what they're trying to do with the character, but I think he ends up in a place where it's a little bit like, okay, like not really sure how Torres got out of that one.
Fair. I do think that what is kind of cool is the Predator itself in this chapter
hmm
also is not like the other Predators, right? He doesn't have
hmm
all the armor. He's not decked out in all the gear. Like his gear is the spaceship.
He doesn't want to get out.
Uh,
He's a pilot, like
right,
suggesting
right.
different,
Yeah, different
hierarchies
classes.
and
Right.
class. Yes,
Yeah.
classes.
Yeah. So I think we agree. Like this is probably not our favorite one. The first two were really superlative. But little did you know, all three of them are going to come together for one big final battle. They have been placed in suspended animation. The three characters that we've seen so far, and are taken to a gladiator-like arena on the world of the Yautja, and they are told to fight to the death. There is this big boss Yautja, this Yautja warlord that is referred to as the Grendel King, and he says, "Hey, you're going to fight to the death, and the winner will face me alone." And so then the three of them fight, and then they figure out a way to get the upper hand and take on the Grendel King together, and kind of flee as a result. We can talk a little bit about the kind of pre-credits stinger at some point.
hmm
But I'm curious, yeah, what did you think of the final battle and the fact that all of them are coming together and needing to fight each other, but trying to outwit their captors?
I thought it worked okay. Like it's a fun setup. But like again, like the tours of it all is like I think it's a weak link and he's very important to like how all of this plays out.
Because
I
he
appreciate
commandeers the vehicles, right? That
he
he
commandeers the
commandeers multiple
vehicle.
vehicles,
He
right? So
survives being in the stomach of the beast. Like there's just like one too many like coincidences that sort of I think work against the character that almost have nothing to do with like the voice actor and things like that. Like all of that worked pretty well for me. I think that the actor sells like the character pretty well. It's just like one incredulous sort of I survived moment after the other, whereas like everybody else like sort of credibly survives like or like escapes from like whatever thing is in front of them. But and then the other thing would be so much throughout these other acts, the predator in the face of somebody just crushes them. And there are like many moments when they make their way up
yeah,
to fight this predator where he pulls his punches. Like So many other times, like he lifts you up with his hand, and he's gonna like with your skull, he's gonna crush it. He can crush it. And here, like, does the equivalent of like I'm going to give a villain speech, allowing the characters to, damn, they got away again. So it's weird to spend so much time deconstructing like the logic or belief in like what's happening in the fight of a Predator film, but I think what I would say is that it's me holding it to an especially high standard because I think it otherwise both demands and hits that. And so it's really like I've seen you do it before, and here again, I think it favors fun over anything else, and it is very fun. And it was just sort of at a certain point I just had to, we're operating in sort of a different tonal mode now, and that's okay. And once I did that, I was able to just like sit and have just a complete blast with how the fights are choreographed. I mean, again, because the choreography here is still spectacular and it looks great and it's really visceral and fun. And despite the fact that this is basically an hour and a half of like utter violence, it's not easy to make that seem interesting over and over again. And what Killer of Killers does, much like Prey does, is it makes it interesting over and over again.
I think you bring up some very fair points about Taurus's plot armor for sure. And I wouldn't say that this is my favorite chapter. I love the idea of, hey, these are characters we've been following and they've been set up to be the ultimate badasses, and now they need to fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool concept. Dan Trachtenberg has said in interviews that he was inspired by Best in Show, the Christopher Guest movie, where you
Sure.
are watching all these characters, and then by the end they need to compete with each other. And it's like, I don't want any of them to lose. And that is kind of how I felt watching this movie as well. I think he did pull that off. But agreed with you on the Torres plot armor stuff, and there are a few contrivances that are a little bit too convenient in this final portion. That said, I did like that Ursa got to have a really heroic moment towards the end. Like that was very, very nice. And it's cool because Ursa is the one that most wants to kill the other two characters initially.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, Patrick, when you fight someone, you get to know them through the fighting, and you might be willing to give up your life for them eventually. And there's something really cool to that idea, and I think it's sold plausibly in the movie. So I love the Ursa moment at the end and sliding down the thing, and she's sacrificing herself so the others can get away. Will they get away? TBD. They're in a terrible state. Kenji's right arm has been torn off. Torres is flying a plane he doesn't really know how to fly. Everyone's going after them. We don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully they'll survive.
They don't have that much of a lead. You know what I mean? It's not like they got a day ahead of all these other ships. It's like,
they're like 30 seconds ahead of everyone else. So.
Those ships might have a turbo button, and my guy can't read the language on the screen. But whatever. It's an extremely cool shot, and the line "Let's go hunting." And actually, I was rooting for. I assumed this was. I mean, I guess some of it depends on the success and the reception of it, et cetera. Probably a lot of it depends on what happens with Predator Badlands, later this year. But it opens up a ton of really cool storytelling. I got to the end going, I hope this isn't it. And then when they found a way to essentially fridge all, literally fridge our
literally
characters.
Fridge. Yeah.
So they could potentially bring them back. I was all in. I was like, great. If this could just be the beginning of a parallel storyline that is happening alongside the films, like, count me in.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about the very ending of the movie. Huge spoiler, but we see that Naru from Prey is in this gigantic refrigerator thingy, which on the one hand is exciting because it means we might see Naru again, but on the other hand, kind of undoes the ending of Prey, right? Like the ending of Prey, spoilers for Prey. Okay.
I disagree, but keep going.
All right. Well, spoilers for Prey, but at the end of the movie Prey, Naru is triumphant over the Predator, right? And she it becomes a unifying force in her tribe. And what is implied here is that, hey, at some point afterwards, they scooped her up. Now, it could have been many years later, and Naru had a wonderful life and then was scooped up. But
did you watch the end credits to Prey?
I believe so. Yeah. What are you referring to?
in the Prey end credits, you eventually start getting some drawings.
Yeah, the drawings
that end with Naru's tribe and a ship that looks exactly like the ship that picks up each of our characters after they are deemed sort of a champion. And at the end, when you watched Prey, I think everyone rightly assumed, oh, this is setting up a Prey 2 if it happens.
Right.
I think what has either been, I don't know what Trachtenberg had planned or what ideas were, but like whether it was a retcon or not. But like now you can plausibly look at that ending as just that is just them coming to collect her as a result of like the setup and killer of killers. So I think it works pretty elegantly, whether that was the plan all along.
Well,
or
absolutely,
not.
absolutely. It's certainly compatible. Like it's certainly compatible with the ending. But it's just like, oh, really? At the end of all that, Naru just got scooped up. You know, like that's kind of the reaction. Right?
It does stink. It does because because the only abduction we see happens with Torres in the third act, and the war is over.
Yeah.
So we don't really have a sense of
how much time, right?
Yeah, we don't. There's not like 2 years later. At least I don't recall there being sort of an implied. But there is a time jump, right? So she had some time, but not a lot before, And obviously, what's happening here is these people are being put into cold storage and sleeping for, hundreds of years.
Yeah. Well, it is also unclear when the fourth chapter in this movie occurs.
Yeah,
it could be 1950 AD, like literally, right? Or it could be in the year 3000. Like we don't know when it occurs. And so, but okay, on the flip side, it does mean we might see Naru again in a Predator movie or like potentially modern day, right? Like who knows? And that is exciting. So I am excited about that. But
in theory, she could still be in Predator Badlands, right? Like there's actually
right,
nothing actually stopping that from occurring based on, nor does it stop, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character from coming back. You wouldn't put him in a live action film, these days, but you could put him in an animated film. So there's a lot of like really fun storytelling and the various nods that are now happening to the Xenomorph and Alien, and Fede Alvarez saying that he'd like him and Dan to co-direct an Alien vs. Predator movie down the line. Like there does seem to be, there does seem to be a way of getting the world building in order in a way that has not previously existed with both the Alien and the Predator franchises, that as someone that is a fan of both, is really exciting to have two very talented filmmakers thinking very thoughtfully about these worlds. You don't always get this level of care and attention to some of the franchises you care about the most. Usually it's just, let's churn out another sequel because, well, they know I'll buy a ticket. I'll hate it, but I'll buy a ticket. And that's just not the place we're in with Alien or Predator, and that's an incredibly cool thing to see.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.